Welcome to the Lemkin Law Podcast, real talk on divorce and family law matters.
Welcome to the Lemkin Law Podcast, real talk on divorce and family law matters, where tough conversations meet real advocacy. Hollie Lemkin is a family law attorney and fierce defender of protective parents. If you're navigating a high-conflict divorce, a custody battle, or you feel like the system isn't listening, hey, you're not alone. This show is here to give you clarity, truth, and a little fire to keep you going. So let's talk about what really happens behind the courtroom doors and how to fight back. I'm your host, Jon Clemence, and today's episode is Parallel Parenting with a Narcissist, How to Stay Sane and Strategic. So first off, Hollie, welcome back. I'm excited to have you on again.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a wonderful discussion on a very important topic. But I always like to start off when I'm talking with people to make sure we understand all the terms we're using, because we're going to talk about co-parenting versus parallel parenting. So can you just explain to us what those two things are, like how they're different?
Parallel parenting is when you have two parties going down the same road, but you're not always on the same topic. You're not connected in how you think about what's in the best interest of your children. So, for example, you would have one parent who thinks they have all the answers and they're going to do things their way, and the other one isn't committed to that. And that would be what I would consider parallel parenting, but not co-parenting.
It sounds to me just from that, even that brief introduction, that co-parenting is probably the ideal. It would be great if everyone was on the same page with regard to how we're going to parent the child. That's probably not always possible. So when would parallel parenting be the safer option?
Parallel parenting usually occurs, in my opinion, in my experience, when you have two people faced with the same topic area or discussion points, but the parents don't have the same thought process about how to resolve the issues in the best interest of the child. So, for example, it's a we're going to do things my way kind of attitude with one parent or the other. And yes, they're still facing the same topics, but they don't have a meeting of the minds, if you will, about what's the best thing to do for the child.
I see. So when you say, well, we're going to do things my way, the immediate word that comes to my mind is narcissism. Like that's something a narcissist would definitely say. So how does narcissistic behavior show up in custody battles or when you're trying to co-parent or parallel parent?
Unfortunately, if it happens frequently, which means that parent isn't aligned with thinking about what is the best thing for the child. It's what they have a basically, if you will, they are having an internal power struggle with themselves. In other words, we're going to do things my way because that's the way I think it should be done, and I know best. And you get kind of that attitude, but that is not the attitude that will result in a really effective order for the benefit of the child. And it happens, unfortunately, quite frequently.
Yeah,
I think that was what you were asking.
I think so, yeah. Just it sounds like the general narcissistic tendencies are just going to show themselves in this area as they do in many other areas.
Correct.
Yeah, and I was actually talking with the producer offline. I mentioned I had to work with a narcissist one time in my life, and I said that was one time too many. So I can only imagine trying to, navigate a custody hearing with a narcissist in the room.
It's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about that. What legal tools or language might be available to create some boundaries when like you're trying to help a client deal with a situation of a parent who's a narcissist and doesn't really want to play ball?
Is to make an order that the parents are obligated to attend and participate in a mediation session where the issue is put before a mediator and the mediator helps the parties structure a way in which they can come up with a set of rules and regulations for that family that will help the child on a day-to-day basis. And that skilled mediator will assist in coming up with a set of household rules, if you will. That's the best way I can say it, is rules that will be governed, that the parties will both agree to, follow, and institute for the benefit of their child, X, Y, and Z. And then they feel like they're being heard and they're being included. Usually it's my experience that a narcissist adopts that attitude and approach because he has an internal inferior set of dynamics going on inside of him. And so he has to put forth that he's the best one to talk to so that he feels like he's really important and he's needed. That is unfortunately an inferior position for that parent to take. But the best way to sidestep that and to get around it so that you have a buy-in from both parents is to applaud that parent for, oh, that was a great idea, or yes, what do you think we should do, or invite their opinion. I find is a better way to get around and handle a narcissistic personality.
Yeah, I think that's just the best way to handle any situation. So I'm glad to know that works, because I mean, you would want to affirm anyone really in that discussion.
Right. Yes. And if you do, they feel like, well, I was heard, and yes, I had the right answer and you didn't. And so therefore I'm superior. So if they want to walk off with that opinion, let them, because at the end of the day, the goal is to make sure that the order or the agreement between the parents is for the best of the child, and the winner is the child.
Yeah, and I'm glad you specified that, because it's so easy to, I'm sure, just jump into like, well, I'm just going to beat this other party because I want to win, because I don't want them to think they won, when really it's the child. What's in the child's best interest, and however we get there is what we need to do. Yeah.
Yeah. All I was going to say is the other way that you might be able to handle a situation is inquire of the narcissist. Well, why do you think that's so important? And how do you think that's going to help? Could you please explain that to me? And act like you're the inferior party by saying, please explain it to me. When in reality, all you're trying to do is expose their mindset so that you're aware of where they're coming from, and you can then approach them in a way that will get them to buy into what you really want for the best interest of the child.
Yeah, I love that approach. Pretty smart approach. I can tell you've done this a time or two.
More than I care.
Yeah, I'm sure. I am curious though, from your perspective and your experience, do you typically know going in when you're going to be dealing with a parent who's maybe showing narcissistic tendencies, or is it something you kind of figure out as you go, or how does that work?
Usually, by the time you get into a courtroom, if that's the setting that you're talking about, usually by then you have met that party at least once. And usually it does not take very long to figure out what they're made of and how they operate. And so you kind of know before you get into a courtroom that that's what they're about. And you have to gear your questions of them and your approach before the court, not criticizing them, but saying this party's struggling with this issue. I think, maybe we would be better off in a mediation setting, Your Honor, so that we could discuss it openly and not such in a formal forum, might help the parties come to an agreement. So if you kind of have a heads up that that's what you're dealing with, I think the best approach is to take it out of a formal setting, because usually a formal setting will stiffen them up if it's the other side, stiffen them up as opposed to letting them relax. If you can get them to relax in the setting, then I think you have a better chance of getting them to come to an agreement with the client you're representing for the best interest of the child.
Yeah. And have you ever had the opposite situation where your client is the one who is showing some of these tendencies and you've had to work with them?
I have. And I usually will, send them off to do homework, if you will. So if they start acting very rigid, and I find being a narcissist is a very rigid stance, and it's sending them off with homework. Go home and figure out what you think is the best and why, and come back to me and let's talk about it. I'm not saying you're right or wrong. I'm just saying I need to understand where you're coming from. So I need you to give me your thoughts and your background about why you think this is important so that we can make that case to the court. And usually that gives me enough information to have an idea that they are, in fact, taking a narcissistic stance. I never give them the label of they are a narcissist, although they may be, but the only exposure I have is that particular instance usually. So I call it a narcissistic stance. And then work with them on, now, how do you think that relates to the child? And then force them to realize and recognize it's not going to help the child. And then they'll usually back off and say, well, we could do it this way instead. And that's when you know you're getting through to them and that they're realizing there might be a better way to do it.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice. And also, thank you for pointing out that, we're not labeling people. We're not psychologists. I can't make that diagnosis, nor can you. We're just talking about this is, what we're perceiving in the moment.
Right.
But I'm glad to know there are actual strategies that you've found that can use to help in these situations, because when it happened to me, I felt very helpless. I didn't know what to do. But I think you've got a lot more experience on, than I do on that.
I will tell you, it's not necessarily a fun event.
No, it's not. Let's talk too about just some continued communication skill stuff. Are there some mistakes that parents would make when they're trying to maybe be nice to the other side in these high conflict situations? Can you be too nice in these settings?
I wouldn't say nice. I wouldn't use the word nice. I would say either weaker, or because what it demonstrates is that you're not going to fight for your child. You're not going to stand up for your child, no matter which side of the equation you're on. If you're the weaker parent and you've got the narcissist attacking you or trying to force you to do something that you really don't want to do, but you're afraid of that person, there may be some domestic violence in that relationship. I don't know, but that's frequently seen with a narcissistic personality in a relationship. So the better thing to do, I think, is just say, you know what? Okay, I'm going to take what you've said and back off, and I'm going to go think about it, and we'll get together again and talk about it. And that's, I think, the better way to extract yourself, as opposed to, oh, okay, we'll do it your way, because that doesn't help the situation. It doesn't solve issues for the benefit of the child.
Yeah, and I, again, to keep going back to, this is all about what's best for the child. I think it's just a great strategy for this and for every subject, right? That's really ultimately, like, don't get involved in some battle that's not going to win you the war.
Right, exactly. And, the old adage that we've all heard is pick your battles. And it couldn't be more true than in this situation where you have a narcissistic personality that you're dealing with.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about one more battle, quote unquote, anyway. As far as the custody agreement itself, are there ways that you can write a custody agreement, or maybe certain phrases or things you can put in that agreement that might help reduce power struggles later on?
Oh, absolutely. If you've identified one party or the other as a narcissist or a problematic personality, it's also true of that. Because like you said, we're not mental health professionals. I couldn't specifically diagnose a narcissist. So I just call it a problematic personality, which keeps me safe from being sued for practicing medicine. But one of the better things to do is say, okay, if we have a disagreement and we've tried, give it some number of times to talk about it or resolve it, then see if you can make an agreement with that person to go to a mental health professional and get their input, or get a session with a mental health professional to see what their thoughts are, and start educating the party that's having a struggle with it, and say, I understand where you're coming from, but this is not in the best interest of your child for these reasons. And do you think that there would be a better way to go about this? Invite them to be the problem solver.
Oh, I like that. And is that something that you would kind of coach and counsel your clients to kind of how to do that for, in their situation?
Absolutely. I say give it a couple tries on your own, and if that doesn't work, reach out to a mental health professional who's skilled in child custody evaluations and child custody training, and invite their thoughts and impressions and solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. Bring in an expert when all else fails.
Right.
Yeah. So, Hollie, I have one more question for you. And
Sure.
in everything in life, mindset is super important. If you have the wrong mindset, you're setting yourself up for failure. So talk to me about a mindset shift you might recommend to parents to help them regain a sense of control when they're dealing with some of these issues.
The one word that comes to my mind that I think I could get my clients to adopt and appreciate is the word openness. It's my experience that if you stay open to input that you're going to get from all sources in a courtroom or in a negotiation or conversation between parties, is stay open, stay willing to listen. Those are the best tools and advantages you can create for yourself with very little trouble. Be willing to listen to what the other side has. Be willing to listen to their suggestions. Congratulate them on good ones and support their good ones and say, yes, those were good suggestions. How about if we could just manipulate it a tiny bit here or there to account for the particular circumstance that they're living with their child? And then make that party feel like, wow, they really did a good job and they knew it and they were the best at this, and let them walk off with that belief if they need to. But you're the one that really won because you got a better deal for your child.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just to put that cherry on top, we're always going back to what's best for the child. And so if the other party wants to feel like they've won, then that's great. Let them. That's amazing.
Let them. There's no skin. It should be no skin off your nose if that's the way they feel.
Absolutely. Well, Hollie, this has been a very informative, very fascinating discussion today. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, you're very welcome. I enjoyed it.
And thank you to our listeners for tuning into the Lemkin Law Podcast, real talk on divorce and family law matters with Hollie Lemkin. To connect with Hollie, visit lemkinlaw.com. And be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review before you take off. And with that, have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.